will make life just a little easier for the average person.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The most memorable moment in my career, without sounding completely conceited, it has to be interviewing President Trump in the Oval Office in the White House. Particularly, the little red button he had on his desk. I had no idea what he did as the interview went on. I wondered more and more, was he going to launch a nuclear strike on North Korea or open up a shark pit that I'd then fall into? Turned out he pressed it right at the end of the interview, and in walked a butler with a tray carrying a Diet Coke. It was a Diet Coke button.
Gentlemen, Arcade Fire started their world tour in Dublin this week, days after the band's frontman, Win Butler, was accused of sexual misconduct. The allegations range from sexual assault to unsolicited sexual text messages and forceful touching. The band will still tour in Canada despite some radio stations there banning their songs following the claims. Butler has denied the allegations. South African actor and model Charlie Dean has died at the age of 32. She died on Monday at a hospital in New York City from a sudden illness. The up-and-coming actor had a co-starring role in Triangle of Sadness, which was awarded the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in May. The film's out here in October. And the Great British Bake Off will return on the 13th of September. Judges Paul Hollywood and Dame Prue Leith return along with presenters Matt Lucas and Noel Fielding. Well, that's your entertainment news on Talk TV.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello, we're heading into the start of the meteorological autumn for the 1st of September onwards, and it really is going to feel autumnal for the weekend. Until then, it's still looking mostly fine thanks to high pressure. The rest of tonight, it stays quiet, clear and dry, quite cold across some rural spots to the north, though, where there may be some low cloud, mist and fog. But for tomorrow, we are going to be seeing plenty of fine and dry weather again, maybe the odd light shower or two across parts of the north, but plenty of bright, fine weather. But later, towards the evening, there will be some heavy showers across parts of the southwest.
The Sunday Times Wine Club sponsors Talk TV weather.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
And a very good morning to you. It's Thursday, the 1st of September. This is Early Breakfast on Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studios, with me, James Max. So, coming up this morning after 6, going to be joined by former BBC and Sky News reader Vivian Krieger. We'll be going through the papers and the front pages. Later this hour, we receive personal finance advice from Dr. Roger Gievold, who's gone beyond frothing. We'll find out why. But he's also looking into who's looking after businesses, why banks don't help, and he wants us all to wake up. Well, we'll find out more details in due course. Meanwhile, Richard Hunter talks us through the very latest market movements. We'll also be looking ahead to card results from Card Factory and talks about the predictions and analysis from Goldman Sachs. Doesn't make for good or easy reading, I have to say. But this morning, the traditional UK family, it's changing. More children being brought up by single parents. I want to know from you, do you need 2 parents to bring up a family? So, very good morning to you. Hope you are well. The summer's over now. It's done. We move on to autumn. And also, we move on to the fact that by next week, thank goodness, after all these weeks of yibba-yabba, chitter-chatter, we might actually have a Prime Minister who can get on and do stuff. And I don't know about you, those hustings. So, I still can't help the fact that Liz Truss, I think, is unable to deliver the pizzazz required. And yet Rishi, who performed well last night, I just wonder whether or not he's a busted flush. And whether we'll be ruining the day that we kicked Mr. Johnson out of office. Let's talk, though, about this. The decline of the traditional UK family is revealed. This is the front page of today's Times newspaper, but it also reaches the front page of the Telegraph as well. Nearly half of British children now grow up outside the traditional two-parent household, according to a report on the makeup of the modern family. This is the Children's Commissioner for England. They've found that almost one family in four is headed by a lone parent, higher than the EU average of 13%. So what that's really talking about is it's talking about the number of children who are brought up in a single-parent household. And that's why I want to know from you whether you need two parents to bring up a family. Is it important? I mean, for example, is it more important to have two parents, or is it more important to have people who are happy in their lives? Because very often people stay together, because of the children. And I've got lots of friends who grew up in families that were perhaps away from the norm. My family, I'd like to say it was normal. Nobody's family's normal. They're all complicated. But I did have, and still have, two parents and three elder brothers. And most of the time we got on occasion. There's an altercation about something. But yeah, look, it was a pretty good lifestyle. And I look at friends of mine who didn't have that. They had single parents, and they had this whole thing where they shuffled between parents at weekends. So one weekend was with one parent, one weekend was another, and I could never understand how on earth they put up with that. It's just like, and they go, I'm going to mum's, or I'm going to dad's, or I'm going to this. And there was always one that they preferred and the other that they didn't. And so I was like, oh, God. And then they had to take all their school stuff and their books and the things and the whatever, and there's all a disruption. And then every other weekend, whichever one that they didn't particularly like, there was always trouble, on the Monday morning with the homework, and you never wanted to be in a project with them because it was always a mess. And then also, if you went to their homes, again, it was always quite stressful going to, because it was just different. But do you need two parents to bring up a family, is what I want to ask you. And what was your situation? Did you grow up in a family with two parents? Did your parents stay together despite the fact they might not have been happy? Or did they split? And did you manage to make it through? Did it have an impact on your life? Because if you start to go into the details of this, it's quite interesting. The Family Review shows that 8.2 million families in the UK with children, 23% are headed by a lone parent. 90% of those lone parents, they're women. Families of Asian descent, including those with Chinese, Indian, Bangladeshi or Pakistani heritage, are more likely to be headed by a married couple. Black African and Black Caribbean families, 44% and 57% were headed by a lone parent. 22% of white British families in lone parent households. And that's why I think that on one hand you want to be colourblind to this, don't you? You want to be historically race blind, you want to be blind to all backgrounds and all... But in fact, you can't be, because different parts of the community have different problems relating to family. There are some parts of the community that still have arranged marriages. Where does that sit within your human rights? Anyway, do you need two parents to bring up a family? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. Do give me a call and tell me your story. Tell me how you think this affects our nation, because there are some who would say this explains why we've got a problem with law and order, because there are fewer male role models in our society, particularly for young black boys, and they will pick that out and they will say that is a problem. There are others who would say there are too many people who discuss this in the context of either family or religion, and there are good parents and there are bad parents. Because the thing is, I know many single parents and lone parents who do an incredible job with their children, and frankly, the children don't miss the fact that the parents aren't rowing, that the parents don't get on, that the parents are not necessarily doing the job that they should be doing. But what about you? Two parents. Do you need two parents to bring up a family? And then what do you do about this? Because here's the other take on this story. Front page of today's Telegraph. Stop ducking the need for stable families. Governments have been too squeamish about standing up for the family, the Children's Commissioner has said, as she called on the next Prime Minister to do more to support couples to stay together. Dame Rachel de Souza told the Daily Telegraph that the data that she collected showed that stable families had a great protective effect, making children happier and more successful. She urged the new Prime Minister and opposition leaders to commit to harnessing what she calls the most powerful foundation for future, a strong, positively family dynamic that offers those within it universal values and provable protections. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that government should be pushing for families to stay together? Because there's an element of that which is like, OK, help families stay together. But then on the other hand, there's an element of that that says, oh, OK, so you're going to keep people together that are unhappy? Where does the morality come into it? I mean, you know, if somebody's going to be a serial philanderer, do you really want to stay in a relationship with that individual? No. Do you need two parents to bring up a family? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. Do give me a call and have your say. And tell me how you think this affects our society. Because if you then take a step back, we have a problem with discipline. We have a problem with discipline in schools. We have a problem with children who aren't necessarily getting the best start in life. We have issues of almost lawless Britain. Well, are these two things connected? Can you connect, and do you connect, the fact that the nuclear family, the traditional family unit that we know and understand, that is clearly changing? And we've got more single parents, and we've got more children who are being brought up in single-parent households. Well, that used to be frowned upon. That used to be something that was almost avoided at all costs. But do you need two parents to bring up a family? 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Do give me a call. Have your say. I'd like to hear from you this morning. I'd like you to tell me your story. I'd like you to tell me whether you think that this... It's perhaps explaining why we've got a situation in our nation where we do have lawlessness on our streets. We do have children who underperform. We do have a situation where perhaps children who are neglected by parents get involved in, whether it's drugs and crime and county lines and all that stuff, because they don't necessarily have the parenting that stops them coming off the rails. Look, children have always come off the rails. There have always been good children, bad children, naughty children. The question is, do you need two parents to bring up a family? 0344 499 1000. OK, let's go to calls now. Darren's in Preston. Darren, good morning.
Hiya, good morning. Are you OK?
Yeah, very good, thanks, Darren. So, two parents. Some people would say we should be pushing for that. According to this headline, we need to stop ducking the need for stable families.
Yeah, well, I disagree. I think we need two parents to raise a family. I'm from a one-parent family.
Right.
And my friends at school, they used to say to me, they're going to the fathers at weekend. And I used to think, where's my father, you know? And
so did you know your father, or was he absent?
He was absent from about 1, but I did meet up with him when I was about 13 years old.
And was that it?
Yeah, and but it was hard, you know.
Sure.
I couldn't understand why my father wasn't there for me and things like that. And it's affected me all through my life, you know. And now I've got I've got 4 children now.
Right.
And I try and be the best father that I can be to my children, you know.
So you've got 4 children, and you stay together with your partner, wife?
No, I'm not together, but I try to be now the best father that I can be to my children, because I know what it was like for me, you know.
Sure, but then, I mean, what this is talking about, though, because it sounds like your even current situation isn't the traditional family where two parents are together.
Yeah, no, and it's been really hard for me, you know.
Sure.
it's so difficult, you know, not having two parents. And when you look at families and you look at people who are successful and i.e. normal.
Darren, I can let you into a secret.
Yeah, they all seem to come from like a mum and dad and brought up normally.
Yeah, but you say that, but the only normal people are people you don't know very well.
Yes.
Because the thing is that there is no normal. We have this view as to what is a normal family, or this is, you know, they seem very happy on the outside and all that sort of business. But then on the other hand, do you not think that part of the reason that we've got a problem is that we have stigmatised those parents who are lone parents, or, you know, for whatever reason, that their marriage hasn't worked, their relationship hasn't worked? Isn't it better to have children brought up with at least parents who are happy? Otherwise, you know, if you keep the parents together and they're not happy, what does that do for the children and the family?
Exactly. That's exactly what you're saying, because I was in a relationship. I'd split up from my partner, and she come back to me and said that she was pregnant 3 months after. So I went back to her and I stayed with her for 10 years, and the relationship was an absolute disaster.
So what did that do for the children?
Well, obviously, I thought at the time that it'd do the children good, you know, because I just wanted to be there for them, to support them, you know, and things like that. But obviously, looking back in hindsight, I wish we'd have been single.
Yeah.
You know?
Now you see that, and that's the point, isn't it, Darren?
Yeah,
thank you very much indeed for your call. It's good to talk. So that's Darren in Preston, and look, from Darren's story, that explains it absolutely in terms of the problems. Of course, you would prefer to have two parents raising a family, wouldn't you? But then, if you look at the very specific situation, and then you look at the difficulties caused to that family, should you have two parents who are no longer getting along, who, for whatever reason, have fallen out of love, it's a disaster, isn't it? Wouldn't it be better to have a single parent and to support them appropriately? But according to this article, and according to this, governments have been too squeamish about standing up for the family, according to the Children's Commissioner. I mean, I'm all for, you know, making recommendations, but as soon as you make recommendations, then as soon as somebody is outside, this is what we recommend you do, then aren't they forgotten? Aren't they neglected? Aren't they not supported in the way that they should be? But then on the other hand, you have a look at lawless Britain, you have a look at what's happening on our streets, and you can say some of the reason for that is because we have too many kids who have been brought up with too many single parents, and the focus hasn't been on the child. And for whatever reason, the system or the parents or the parent has neglected the upbringing of that child. And now look, and we reap what we sow. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. Do you need two parents to bring up a family, is what I'm asking you this morning here on Talk TV. More of your calls next. Very good morning to you. It's 5:20. You're listening and watching me, James Max, here on Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studios. Hope you're well this morning. And I'm talking to you about this story which... this goes right to the core of society, doesn't it? Stop ducking the need for stable families, the next Prime Minister has told. Governments have been too squeamish about standing up for the family. The Children's Commissioner has said, my problem with standing up for the family, and I don't... Look, I guess it's always preferable to have two parents, and it's always preferable to have a family that's harmonious. But sometimes they're not. And the question is, how do you make sure that those who do not come from harmonious families don't fall through the cracks? And I guess it actually means that you've got to have a two-pronged attack. Prong one is, OK, supporting the family and trying to keep them together. But then prong two is making sure that if, for whatever reason, that family unit doesn't stay, then what do you do about the children, in particular, who then become part of lone parent families? And how do you make sure that they don't suffer, that they don't necessarily... I mean, they are always going to suffer psychologically to an extent because their life is different. And the thing is that if you normalise and say, this is preferable, this is how you get the best, and then you're always going to be stigmatised, aren't you, as a child who grew up with a single parent? Anyway, decline of traditional UK families revealed nearly half of British children now grow up outside the traditional two-parent household, according to a report on the makeup of the modern family. And then it goes on, and this is a race thing, to an extent. Families of Asian descent, including those with Chinese, Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani heritage, they are more likely to be headed by a married couple. That having been said, amongst black African and black Caribbean families, 44% and 57% were headed by a lone parent. Is that part of the problem? Do we not... I mean, on one hand, isn't the thing here that we... Instead of stop ducking the need for stable families, don't we need to look at different parts of our community and say, look, these areas, clearly they're fine, they don't need our help. These areas really do. So how do we reach to these people? How do we try and make sure that these people receive the support or the help that they need? 0344 499 1000 is my number. Do you need two parents to bring up a family? Philip is in the West Midlands. Philip, good morning.
Good morning, young man. Hopefully I can have something to contribute to the discussion.
Well, let's see.
Well, all I want to say is there's no such thing as a single-parent family.
No?
No, absolutely not. You know, we all come from somewhere, and that involves two people, one way or the other, whether it be surrogate, via some other means, adoption, whatever. But there's no such thing as one parent. That's an absolute joke.
Yeah, but then on the other hand, there are a lot of people who are brought up by one parent, and the other is absent.
I'm not denying that, but it doesn't mean to say a mother can't be a mother or a father can't be a father just because they're not together.
But
does that make any sense towards you?
Well, it makes sense in terms of what you're saying, but it doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of the results. Because if you have a look at the results, children who have two parents who are present, i.e. together,
yes,
regardless of whether they're married or not, but if they have two parents who are living under the same roof, they tend to do better at school. They tend to do better in their lives.
Well, I don't know where you're getting the information from, but I mean...
Well, the Times newspaper.
I've been separated from my wife now for 10 years and never get divorced because I don't believe in divorce. My children are 30 years of age.
Right.
That won't stop being my children. I'm still a parent. I'm still somebody who cares for someone. Just because I'm not living under the same roof doesn't make that I'm any less a person or any less supportive than somebody who is living under the same roof. I'm sorry, chap, but you know you got it wrong.
Well, it's
not you personally, but you know.
Okay, but then not that. But here's the point, though. Not everybody necessarily would have your attitude. So, say for example, there are some people who do walk away from other halves, and they walk away, and they are. I mean, look, my last caller, he said that he'd seen his father once when he was 13, and that was it. I mean, So it's that kind of behaviour. I mean, I guess what you don't want to do is if, you know, the relationship between two parents doesn't work and you end up separating. If both parents are committed to making sure that children are looked after, are given good due care and attention, you're absolutely right. There's no reason why
Yes.
they shouldn't have just as good an upbringing as anybody who's under a two-parent household, which is why I do struggle with the stop ducking the need for stable families argument that they seem to be putting out. But what about those who do have an absent parent, an absent mother, or in particular an absent father?
Yes, and that does happen, obviously. I'll say this to you, you know, there's many people in this world who, for whatever reason, has to let the children go, be it by abusive relationship, whatever. Does that stop them being the parent of that child?
Doesn't necessarily stop. No, it doesn't necessarily stop them. But I guess what we're talking about here is it's less about whether factually you are the parent. It's more about, well, what does the children benefit, or what does the child benefit from, and how does the child feel or suffer?
You're still going to be that parent. How you deal with it is entirely down to yourself.
Yeah, no, I see your point. But then how do you make sure then that children who I don't know, perhaps live in single parent families or relationships or whatever, how do you make sure that they're not disadvantaged in our system?
You can't, can you? You can't make sure of anything in that kind of sense. The only thing you can give them is love.
What if they're not getting it?
Parent or two parents.
What if they're not?
It doesn't matter. They've still got a father and mother, a surrogate.
But what if they're not getting it?
An adoption. What am I trying to say? I'm saying to me that single parents running one family household. No, sorry, you're completely and utterly wrong. Unfortunately.
So why do children with two parents under the same roof, why do they often do better?
Well, apparently that's what you're telling me. But listen, my mum and dad was never completely in sync. Right? Now, that could have done more damage to me than having a single parent, as you call it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And the thing is, look, different people are going to have different experiences, and what I wouldn't want to do is I wouldn't want to stigmatise anybody who does have parents who are separated. And as you say, you might have two very committed parents; they live in two separate places, and it may work very well. And the question is, how do you make sure?
That's the way,
Hopefully, how do you make sure that isn't stigmatised when you've got somebody who does say?
How can you possibly make sure that's sure? You can't make sure if they live under the same roof.
No.
So how can you make sure that something's going to happen, whether they're separated or not?
Yeah.
In fact, I'll be quite truthful with you. I think there's more chance that you'll do more damage living under the same roof to the children than being separated.
If you're in an unhappy relationship, you mean?
Yes.
Right. There we go. No, I think that's a very good point. Philip, thank you very much indeed for your call. Good to chat. Let's go to Sandra, who's in the West Midlands. Sandra, good morning.
Morning, James. How are you?
Good morning, Sandra. I'm very well, thank you. Hope you are too. So, do you need two parents to bring up a family?
Well, in an ideal world, yes. But the thing is, I've been a lone parent now for a long time. I look after my son who's got haemophilia. My daughter died when she was 10 weeks old.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And the ex-partner never come to see my son at all. He's never seen him. He's 30 now, my son is, and he's such a lovely boy. He's coming to, he's a young...
And he's never met his father?
No, I was in arranged marriage.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, arranged marriage, and the mother-in-law always hated me because I was too English.
Right.
And she didn't like the fact that because I was born and bred here, she didn't like the fact that I cut my hair, wear trousers, just the usual stuff, you know what I mean?
And so, what was she looking for you to be then?
She wanted me to be proper Indian, which I won't.
Right. And so, what do you make of it when, for example, we see in a newspaper headline, "Stop ducking the need for stable families. Governments have been too squeamish about standing up for the family," according to the Children's Commissioner. Is she right to do that? Is she right to call for that?
Well, you know what? Everybody's got an individual point, you know what I mean? But my point is, you better, if you're going to argue all the time, you're better off being alone and look after your son. You know, it's better that you bring him up alone and you tell him the values of life.
And do you think, I mean, when it comes to whether it's education, whether it comes to life chances, do you think that there is something in this that those who have two parents will probably do better?
Not really. Everybody's an individual. You know, everybody's got a brain in their head. You know, you use that brain. You know, everybody's an individual person. But me personally, I've been very happy.
Well, that's good to hear. And thank you for sharing your story, Sandra. Good to speak to you. That's Sandra in the West Midlands. So, I'm asking you this morning, do you need two parents to bring up a family? 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number. We'll take some more of your calls a little bit later on. However, we need to turn our attention to the big business news stories of the day. And we are joined this morning by Richard Hunter, he's Head of Markets at Interactive Investor. Richard, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, James.
Look, we've heard a lot about the markets. We've heard a lot about what's been going on. We've heard a lot about all sorts of things that, frankly, are not really very good pieces of news. And I'm afraid what we've seen over the last couple of weeks has been really horrendous. In terms of the FTSE 100, so these are the biggest companies which are listed on the London Stock Exchange, we were sort of celebrating the fact that markets elsewhere had tumbled and ours had not. Not the case anymore, is it?
No, we've turned downwards over the last few trading sessions. FTSE's down about 1.5% now in the year to date, which in relative terms is still a fairly strong performance. One of the things that has weighed on the FTSE more recently is the oil price has been under pressure. Obviously, with what's going on elsewhere, there are very much concerns that demand will be weak in the likes of US and indeed China, which has got its own economic problems at the moment. So the oil price is still up by 20% over the year, but well off its highs. And of course, when you've got oil majors such as BP and Shell being fairly large constituents of the FTSE 100, that has put some downward pressure on the index. So we're not immune from what's happening globally. Ironically, one of the things that's helped limit that fall has been the weakness of sterling against the US dollar in particular. Obviously, what that means is that since most of the FTSE 100 companies' earnings come from overseas, and especially the States, when they're then translated back into sterling, they're more valuable. So that has put some support under the index, but nonetheless, as you say, we have dipped into negative territory.
When we start to look at negative territory, all we have to do is go over to the US. Even though the US possibly is doing better currency-wise, we'll talk about the currency in a second, but their Dow Jones index, the main index, and then the S&P 500, but also the NASDAQ, which is kind of made up of all the tech stocks, all of those have taken an absolute bath.
Yes, they certainly have. And in fact, since we last spoke, there was something called the Jackson Hole Symposium at the end of last week. That's an annual meeting of the central banks in Wyoming in the States. And there had been some hopes from American investors that perhaps the Federal Reserve would basically start to taper some of its comments about its aggressive interest rate hikes. Far from it. What they basically said was that their absolute central aim was to tackle inflation by raising interest rates. They were aware, or they remain aware, that might just tip the country into a recession, but inflation is absolutely the first priority. And to be fair, the economic data that's coming out of the States at the moment is tending to suggest at the moment that the economy is strong enough to withstand these interest rate rises. However, technology stocks in particular, because their share prices are based on future earnings, have taken the brunt of the fact that we're in a rising interest rate environment, and the markets have taken a bath indeed in the States, as you say.
Let's talk about what Goldman Sachs have been saying. For anybody who doesn't know, Goldman Sachs, who are they and why do we listen to what they say?
Yeah, they're a massive global American investment bank. They are peppered with experts in their field, not just economists, but also analysts, traders. They're a big noise on Wall Street. and have been for some decades.
And I think it's important also to say, when we say investment bank, it's clearly very different from a retail bank. So your high street bank that you get your card from and you save with, or you put your money with, or they do your banking. Goldman Sachs may do some of that on the side, but their big market movements, they take positions, they bring companies to market, they facilitate mergers and acquisitions, they have incredible reach and distribution, so that they really understand what is happening in the financial markets. I mean, their expertise, I mean, them along with Morgan Stanley and various others, they rule this area of the financial services arena, don't they?
Yes, that's right. And obviously, as the world's largest economy, and Wall Street being one of the more powerful financial centres, they also have a global reach. So when they make economic assumptions based on the current view that they're seeing, then people are going to sit up and listen. And that particular assumption that you're referring to was that should energy prices continue to spiral upwards, as they have been underlined, then inflation could reach anything up to 22%, which is quite eye-watering figure from where we are at the moment.
Certainly is, and certainly some very difficult times ahead, and I think this is probably going to last longer and be more difficult than protracted than people had first thought. So we turn our attention then to Q2 numbers, which are due from FTSE small cap member, Card Factory. Who are they and why do we care what their results are?
Yeah, this is just another sign of the times in terms of having had a fairly good pandemic. As the name would suggest, they are a card retailer. And of course, while you can quite comfortably say that the greetings card market in terms of physical cards is in terminal decline, we hear this from Royal Mail every time they release some numbers. Nonetheless, there has been a spike, not only in online cards, but equally importantly in the gift attachments that you can add to them. So the market there is burgeoning. Now, the problem that Card Factory have had, and the shares are down by about a third over the last year, is the strength of competition, as in so many other areas. And in particular, the likes of Moonpig, who've got a big marketing budget, have put the shares under pressure. So the company has had recently to refinance its debt facilities. So the reason for mentioning this one is not so much about what's been a post-pandemic loser in terms of the share price, but rather another reflection of the times as we move into online and digital rather than physical. And in this case, we're talking about greetings cards.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting, very interesting to see what happens. Thank you very much indeed, Richard, for joining us this morning. That is Richard Hunter, Head of Markets at Interactive Investor, bringing us up to date with the very latest business news. I'm talking to you this morning about whether you need two parents to bring up a family. And that's because on the front page of today's Times newspaper, we've got decline of the traditional UK family is revealed. It's a landmark study finding a big rise in lone parenting. And then also on the Telegraph, where they say, stop ducking the need for stable families. And I just wondered, look, on one hand, I definitely understand the support and requirement to try and persuade people that two parents are better than one, etc. But on the other hand, you don't want to stigmatise those who do an incredible job bringing up families, and very adequately, with one parent, do you? 0344 499 1000 is my number. Rodney is in Brighton. Rodney, good morning.
Good morning, James. Loving the glasses this morning.
Thanks. They're the same glasses I had on yesterday, but there we are. I have them for reading, Rodney. Can you believe it? I'm quite blind, so I have contact lenses so that I can see, and then as a result of the contact lenses that I have, I now have to wear reading glasses so that I can then read and things. It's a tragedy. I know it's a tragedy. Anyway, right. We've distracted away from what you wanted to say. What do you want to say?
No, I just want to say that, we're talking about the 2 kids and 3 kids, stuff like that, but the fundamental question is, there's not enough kids being born in this country.
Oh, God, we don't need any more, Rodney.
Well, you don't think so?
No.
Jesus Christ. We need more people to have kids in order to grow up, in order to pay for the pensions for the old.
Oh. Yeah, no. I mean, I think there are quite a lot of children kicking about, and haven't we got a problem that we don't have enough schools? and we don't have enough places at university, and we don't have enough other things. I mean, we've got to grow our infrastructure before we can persuade anybody to have any more children.
Yeah, and who's stopping that? NIMBYism.
Oh.
Look at that.
Well,
NIMBYism.
yeah, but you want a school planted next door to your house? Have you heard the racket they make?
Hey, build a project, big housing in my infrastructure. I live in Lewis, and please build the whole thing, and I'm happy to support that. You know what I mean? But you know what? I've got the Greens and the Lib Dems saying no. Middle-class people are saying no to building infrastructure, building no to housing, building no to solar panels. And I'm just like... And that's the big problem right now. And I know we're talking about kids, but the kids are the future. But right now, NIMBYism is stopping everything else.
So do you think NIMBYs do NIMBYs do more damage to our society than single-parent families then?
Right now, they are.
Wow. Who knew that our conversation was going to go in that direction? Rodney, thank you very much indeed for your call.
Thank you.
Only leaving it there for time reasons. Good. We'll speak again very soon. I'm sure that's Rodney in Brighton. We'll take more of your calls in on this in a few moments' time. Do you need two parents to bring up a family is what I'm asking you. Plus, you know how Dr. Roger Givold likes to froth and get really worked up about stuff? He's off the chart today. We'll find out why next. Very good morning to you. 5:45 is the time. It's me, James Max, with you until 6:30 when Julia Hartley-Brewer will be here for your Thursday morning breakfast show. After 6, going to be joined by Vivian Krieger, former BBC and Sky newsreader. We'll be going through the papers together and the front pages. But before then, talking to you about this. Do you need two parents to bring up a family? This is based off the decline of traditional UK families revealed. Front page of today's Times newspaper, in which they say nearly half of British children now grow up outside the traditional two-parent household. But that really, doesn't that really speak volumes in terms of education, in terms of our society, in terms of lawless behaviour? Is this the explanation for it? The fact that we don't have the strong family units that we once had? Do you think that, for example, when it moves on to the Telegraph and it says, stop ducking the need for stable families, the next Prime Minister's told, governments have been too squeamish about standing up for the family, according to the Children's Commissioner. She's called on the next Prime Minister to do more to support couples to stay together. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number on that. We'll take more of your calls and comments a little bit later on. Meanwhile, as you know, he loves to get in a right old froth. And today is no exception. I speak of the one, the only, Dr. Roger Givold, CEO of Fair Money, personal finance and credit expert. Dr. Roger, good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
You're fast becoming a national treasure. And the thing
Thank
is,
you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Here's the thing. So you start off and you're frothing, and then you tell me in an email that you're beyond frothing. I mean, what does that look like?
Well, it's even worse because I've got no video of you this morning.
Oh.
I can't see you, and I'm not sure I can get through this without looking at your excellent mien. So maybe the producer can do something about it. But
who only knows? All I know is that we can see you periodically, and I know that you're there. So let's ignore the technology and apparently, your first one, wakey, hang on a second, it sounds like... I can see how...
There we go. Well done. Thank you.
With your glorious background there of green. Let's talk, though, about the thing that you want us to wake up about. 5 days' time, what happens, Roger?
Well, I was going to say, James, that in 5 days' time, we're going to have a new prime minister, and let's hope that after all the waffle, she or he comes up with some real concrete help for our biggest problem, which is the cost of living crisis. But last night, I don't know about you, but I watched most of the final hustings where some 6,000 tweed-wrapped, sherry-swilling conservative party members assembled at Wembley Arena. And I was flabbergasted when Liz Truss, who is the leader, was asked, what is she going to do? Her answer was that, well, the Chancellor will tell you, in so many words.
It was very interesting that for neither candidate was the cost of living crisis as acute as it is on the street. And I think that unless or until they realise just how serious it is, and if only because they say that they are business supporting, that they're going to see a huge amount of business failures and a huge amount of people out of work and a huge amount of people really suffering on the basis that there has been a significant knock to people's income. I want to see more from, and I don't care which one gets it, because I think neither of them is particularly up for the job. I haven't said that. Compared to the other hustings, Rishi won it hands down last night.
I think it's even worse than that, James. I think that the whole narrative the last 5.5 weeks and even before that, the last couple of months, has been about the consumers and the cost of living crisis. And their businesses haven't even been mentioned. Now, if they don't do something for businesses, then whatever they do for consumers, if they actually do something, is going to be swept away because the businesses are going to have to keep raising their prices. They're going to go out of business, as you say. And not only that, but the 45 billion pounds that Sunak gave away during the pandemic, that will be for nothing. So I'm just amazed at how we are treated. We're treated like little children, like idiots. None of the candidates before and the remaining two has said anything of any substance to us. I'm not surprised that people like Martin Lewis have challenged them to a debate
Well, I think they are going to have to be challenged, and I think you're absolutely right, and I genuinely hope that Martin Lewis, and indeed others, and I will continue to hold them to account on the basis that I want to see real change and reform. The one thing that Liz Truss did say that I thought was quite interesting is that she did say the tax system is too complicated, and we need to simplify it, and we need to do that at the same time as providing immediate help for people who need it. So
yes, but all her attention around tax and tax cuts and tax system doesn't affect the people. And they just don't seem to see this. The people who broke into a food bank in Cwmbran in South Wales yesterday left all the charity money in the charity box and just stole food and drink.
I know.
They don't pay tax. They don't earn enough to pay tax.
No, exactly. They don't earn enough to pay tax, and maybe that's part of the issue as well.
So
exactly, cut tax doesn't necessarily help those people who are desperate. Anyway,
and cutting VAT, same thing. They're not spending.
Yeah, well, VAT might help. I mean, VAT seems to punish the poorest the hardest, but there we are. Yeah. Let's talk about banks. Apparently they should be doing more. Really?
Well, this is where, as you say, I'm beyond frothing and into the deepest, darkest despair. More and more people are coming to me, telling me how their mortgages have doubled, their monthly payments have doubled and more, their credit card interest fees, their overdraft fees, even their arranged loan fees, everything with the banks are skyrocketing. They're rising relentlessly, James, and out of all proportion to the recent Bank of England rate increases. How in the world do they get away with this? Where are the government people and politicians who are supposed to protect us from this sort of outrageous behavior? Many people, as you always say, and many others do too, the bankers have never been called to account. No one's been punished. No one's been disciplined since the financial crisis stroke credit crunch they caused 10 years ago. I mean, how do they get away with this stuff?
But you see, what I find extraordinary is less about that, because I think that there are too many people who were not blamed for what happened there, and I think part of it sits very squarely in our political leaders' laps as well. Although they, of course, deny all responsibility and started talking about casino banking, which was a nonsense in the first place, in my view. But more importantly, what you've raised is another example of a regulator who is asleep at the wheel. And when you see financial products rising in cost, of course we understand interest rates and various other things, but when you start to see some of the extra costs and the application of, rinky-dink fee structures and contractual terms and all sorts of things that seem not to be being regulated,
it's profiteering. I mean, look, the bank, I'm not anti-banks or anti-bankers, and the bankers are human beings just like us, but I mean, surely they can see that when somebody like Richard Walker has to get Iceland to partner with a charity to make interest-free loans to people so that they can eat, that they ought to be able to do something more for customers.
Absolutely.
What they're doing is little cosmetic bits and making a lot of noise about it. Having a pack of horses run around is ridiculous.
Sticking plasters over gaping wounds. Just very quickly, Roger, who's going to look after the businesses?
Well, that's the point that I made earlier, which is that in all this narrative where really we've been told nothing, just a lot of hot air, they're not talking about the businesses. All of these price caps and things apply to you and me, not to businesses. So if the Bank of England keeps stupidly raising interest rates in a cost-push inflation situation where consumer demand isn't driving it and prices keep rising and there are no caps and everything that supposedly is being done for consumers is not done for businesses, the stores around the corner and the giant department store one street away and the huge company doing this and the giant company doing that, all of which we depend on, they're going to fail.
And that's going to be a real problem. Dr. Roger Guivold, no wonder you've gone beyond frothing. CEO of Fair Money, personal finance and credit expert. Thank you very much indeed for giving us your take on the personal finance stories. Meanwhile, let's go back to your calls on whether you need two parents to bring up a family. Alan's in the East Midlands. Alan, good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Alan. What can you tell me?
Well, I think you do need two parents. I mean, I had my mum and dad, but obviously my dad, he wasn't really taking anything to do with it and that. It was more my mum that showed all his love and how to do things and all that. As I grew up, I tried to be a bit better myself and that.
And so do you... So because of what happened to you in your life, how much did it affect you?
It affected me a lot. So I couldn't show my lad love because my dad never showed me love and all that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And
what do you make then of this? Which I've received a message from Johnny who says, not only should children ideally have both parents to bring them up, but they should absolutely have a balance of a mother and a father and not same-sex parents. Presumably, if love comes from two individuals, it doesn't matter who they are, does it?
Yeah, obviously, but you need your dad to give you love and all, so you can, if you have kids, then you can show them love and that, then what the mum shows them love and that, I mean.
Yeah, and how many of society's problems that we see today, whether it's lawless behaviour or children not achieving their full potential or all that, how much of that is to blame on the breakdown of the family unit?
I think it's a lot, because my lad came to me when he was 13-year-old. His mum just dropped him off at me. I didn't have anywhere to live and all that. I had to go to council, welfare and all that. I got a flat off them. They gave me nothing. Kids were sleeping on tiles and that.
And I suppose that's partly the reason, Alan. We must leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your call this morning. We turn our attention to the papers next, and that's after the news at 6.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 6.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. A report claims that real-term household disposable incomes are expected to fall by 10% over the next year. It means that earnings are falling at their fastest rate in 25 years. And the Resolute Foundation think tank is warning this could push millions more people into poverty. And if accurate, the projections would mean that real pay growth since 2003 will be wiped out next year. Well, cost of living support was top of the agenda as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak went head-to-head last night at a packed Wembley Arena in their final Tory leadership hustings before the new Prime Minister is announced. In a surprise move, Liz Truss indicated she may look at scrapping the speed limit and smart motorways and ruled out any new taxes, while Rishi Sunak said he would be more realistic on the economy.
My first approach will be to reverse the national insurance increase, not have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy, so people immediately see reductions in their fuel bills. My second priority is increasing the supply of energy to the UK.
Given that I have consistently said that inflation is the #1 priority facing our country, it will be my #1 priority. I've been saying that since the beginning of this campaign. I can guarantee that it will fall far faster with my plan than it will with anyone else's.
Campaigners are calling on the government to abandon its controversial plan to send some migrants to Rwanda and free those awaiting removal from detention. Charity Medical Justice says the harm inflicted on detainees impacts their health and well-being and claims that some of those likely to be sent to the African country have been victims of torture and should be protected by the UK. The United Nations has accused China of serious human rights violations, suggesting the treatment of its Uyghur Muslim population could constitute crimes against humanity. It's part of a long-awaited report into abuse allegations in the Xinjiang province, all of which China denies. And Tony, Betty, Cillian and Glenn are among this year's storm names that have been revealed by the Met Office. Storms started to be named in 2015 to warn people when they have the potential to cause severe damage or threat to life. In February, Storm Eunice killed 17 people as record-breaking winds hit the UK. And Serena Williams' solo career isn't over yet as she advanced to the third round of the US Open with a win against Estonian second seed Anett Kontaveit. The 40-year-old announced her intention to retire after the Grand Slam but insisted there's still a little left in her. Meanwhile, British hopeful Jack Draper launched a straight sets victory over sixth seed Felix Auger-Aliassime. The 20-year-old told reporters that he fears no one in the tournament. Now time for today's weather with Nazanin Gaffer.
Times World News sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello, it's the first day of meteorological autumn and it certainly will be feeling rather autumnal with wet and windy conditions as we head into the weekend. That's due to the fact that the jet stream will be dipping its way southwards and that's going to allow low pressure systems to bring through fronts with very wet conditions as well as strong winds. But not so for today. For today, we just about have high pressure hanging on, allowing for mostly fine weather. In fact, it's a mainly dry and bright start out there for this morning, although there may be some early patches of mist and fog around parts of northern England, some low cloud around parts of Scotland, where it will be quite a cold start in some rural spots. Temperatures may only be a degree or so above freezing. Into the afternoon, though, there will be some good spells of sunshine. It will be a mostly fine and settled day, just the odd light shower or two possible. But later, I think, especially later this afternoon towards this evening, there will be the risk of some heavy showers across central and southern areas, particularly across the southwest. And in fact, for the night-time period and into tomorrow, we see two areas of low pressure come through and bring through some very heavy showers and wet and windy conditions across many western and southern parts of the UK for tomorrow. And as I said, into the weekend, it gets increasingly wet and windy across much of the UK.
Times World News sponsors Talk TV Weather.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
coming up to 5 minutes past 6 o'clock. Very good morning. This is Talk TV live from the Talk Radio studios with me, James Max. I'm with you till 6:30 this Thursday morning, the 1st of September. Oh, summer is kind of coming to an end. But what a summer it's been, hasn't it? Anyway, we might get some rain over the course of the next week. Still can't use the hose pipe, though. Anyway, we'll be turning our attention to some big stories from the papers. Going to be joined by Vivian Krieger, former BBC and Sky News reader. We'll be picking our way through some stories, including the discussion about Gorbachev. We'll be talking about Nigella and why she's garnered some headlines. We'll talk about Her Majesty the Queen as well, and indeed some tips to cut your food bills as well. Meanwhile, on the front page of your Times newspaper, and indeed on the front page of the Telegraph as well, they talk about a new report coming out from the government, from the Children's Commissioner, talking about the government being too squeamish about standing up for the family, and indeed the decline of the traditional UK family has revealed landmark study finds a big rise in lone parenting. And I'm asking whether you need two parents to bring up a family. 0344 499 1000 is my telephone number on that. Meanwhile, a lot of incoming on at Talk TV and at the James Max. Annette says, good morning, James. Rishi did not win that hustings yesterday. Liz won it. Really? Oh, okay. That's me told. If you want to get involved in any of the conversations, you can do so. I'll get some more of your comments in a moment. However, we must say good morning to Vivian Krieger, former BBC and Sky News reader. Viv, good morning to you.
Good morning, James. How are you this morning?
Yes, really well. Thank you so much for joining us here on Talk TV. It is much appreciated. Before we turn our attention to the stories that you've picked out, inevitably one has to take a look at the front pages and the Times newspaper. Decline of traditional UK family revealed. I mean, this is one of those stories that has quite a lot of layers to it, because on one hand, I thought we'd got over this discussion about whether, you know, single parents are good or bad. It rather depends on how the single parent tackles the situation and whether they have enough money to be able to make sure that they can live a half-decent life, and also whether, you know, the children feel as if they are love stable and secure. And there are some great single parents, lone parents, and there's some awful ones, in the same way that there's some fantastic married couples who are brilliant parents, and there are some awful ones. I thought we'd gone away from that. But then there's also another layer in terms of when you have a look at this piece here, which says families of Asian descent, including those from Chinese, Indian, Bangladeshi or Pakistani heritage, they're far more likely to be headed by a married couple. But if you move to black African and black Caribbean families, 44 and 57% headed by a lone parent. It kind of means that you can't ignore the race or the historical element here, can you?
Well, I think we have to come into the 21st century now. And I mean, we know now that the nuclear family, as it's called, is not the norm, is it, anymore? So, I mean, I can speak from personal experience because my stepdaughter lives with her mum. And her mum is the most brilliant mum you could possibly imagine. She gets so much attention from her mother, and you can see how she's blossoming, my stepdaughter, from this. So I would never ever say that you have to have a mum and a dad for a child to be raised properly. I just don't believe that in this day and age. And of course now we've got same-sex couples bringing up children, and they can be absolutely wonderful parents as well. So where do we go now? Because we're reading that the divorce rate has gone up horribly. We're reading that fewer and fewer couples are getting married, and we have to accept that that's the way things are moving on in the times we live.
And you see, I think the danger of couching this report in the way that it has been is that you then start to point the finger at lone parents and lone parenting as something which is bad, which is, it's only bad in the same way that, you know, joint parenting is only bad if the parents are bad. I mean, you know, some parents are good, some parents aren't, and I'd much rather pick up and make sure that a child has every opportunity, and also that child isn't stigmatised from the fact that some people seem to think that it's okay to say, oh, well, you know, if only you'd had two, you know, mum and a dad, as opposed to two mums, two dads, or one of whoever looking after you. It strikes me as odd that we're sort of going back to this finger pointing where you can't possibly be if this is your background.
Well, yeah, and you also have to make the point that you could have in where there's a mum and a dad, you could have the most fantastic mum who looks after the child, who does everything that a traditional mother does, and then you could have a father who's simply not interested, who's not a good dad, and who doesn't take the kid to football, take it swimming, etc., etc. So you could have the traditional family where it doesn't work anyway. And then you have a single mother who's absolutely fantastic, as I said, in my own experience.
So meanwhile, on the front page of the Times, we've got a picture of Boris Johnson who took part in a drug raid yesterday to the bewilderment of residents in his farewell tour. What's going on there?
Now, that one I haven't seen as yet, James. As you may know, I've had very little time to prep this morning.
Well, I know we were supposed to have the pleasure.
Oh,
yes, we were supposed to have you with pleasure. And nobody's doing any work, so we couldn't get you in. Unbelievable.
Yes. I was waiting in the street. Let's give a little knock to Uber. I was waiting in the street for 50 minutes for my Uber, which never came, which is why I'm now doing this from home and haven't had that much time to look at the papers. So
I mean, obviously Uber aren't here to defend themselves, so frankly they weren't there to pick you up either.
No, they weren't. Two of them weren't there to pick me up. So so forgive me for being a little unprepared this morning.
Oh, don't worry. I'm sure we can muddle our way through. Let's talk about Liz Truss and Rishi, though, because they inevitably, I mean, it's one or the other. I said this morning that I thought, on the basis of last night, that Rishi Sunak did better. I was told off by Annette, who said, no, it was Liz what won it. But there's an element of me that just doesn't really care, on the basis that I think the nation is not going to be happy with either of them, and soon they're going to be out of office unless they pull a few rabbits out the hat.
Well, I was listening to various stations last night, and I read that the crowd that was at the Wembley Arena were a crowd that were more likely to be on Rishi Sunak's side. So Liz Truss perhaps started off being at a disadvantage. You never know with that crowd. But anyway, it still seems obviously that Liz Truss is going to win. I mean, all this stuff about how prepared are they, whether it's Rishi or Liz Truss who wins, how prepared are they to come out with what the public wants to hear, specifically about gas and electric prices, of course. And Liz Truss has said she hasn't seen the books, so she can't make any comment, but she must have a plan. She must know that it's the first thing that people want to hear about. So you can't believe that she doesn't know what she's going to do at this stage. And like Rishi Sunak, on the chance that they've got it wrong and that he wins, he's obviously got plans as well. But it's what the public wants to hear. And we're hearing that Liz Truss might sort of aim everything at the red wall seats. And that would be to the detriment of traditional Tory seats. There's so much going on. I mean, it's actually a very exciting few days, don't you feel, coming up?
Well, I think finally, after all this, weeks and weeks and weeks of talking, finally there's got to be massive action. And I think that action's got to be quick, it's got to be decisive, and they can't do what they've done before. They've got to get the big bazookas out. You cannot tackle the cost of living crisis with a few mealy-mouthed comments and equivalents. And I think this is partly where Rishi doesn't necessarily have track record, is that he kind of had to be pushed kicking and screaming almost into, when he did make the moves, finally during the pandemic, they were good. But certainly post that, when he said, oh, yeah, no, I'll just cut 5p off fuel, it was pathetic. It made no difference to anybody. Fuel had pretty much doubled overnight, and then he took 5p off it, and they're still taking, 70 or so % of every litre of fuel that we buy is tax. So, to my mind, that was too little too late. Anyway, let's move on to some other headlines, front pages. The Daily Telegraph, Truss hints she may axe motorway speed limits. This is another big story of the day.
I can't understand why would this be on her priority list? I mean,
because I think people are really cross about it. I think people are really cross about smart motorways which aren't smart, the huge amounts of money which have been spent, which basically they spent because they couldn't be bothered to invest in our roads properly. So they said, oh yeah, we'll use the lane which we use for emergencies. So we'll shove traffic in that and it'll be safe. And no, it isn't. Nobody feels safe with them. And the other thing is that with the technology that we now have in many motor vehicles, you know, if I'm going 76 miles an hour, compared to 70, you know, if I cross the channel and I'm in France, I can go 85, and their speed limits seem to work pretty well over there. You've got a whole stupid green lobby who say, oh, you know, it's because of the environment that we're going slower. We've got a huge number of electric cars, most of which have cameras and protections all around them. You know, it makes no sense to have these speed limits that we have. We've got congestion on our roads as a result of it. I'd much rather put a real stop to terrible driving or people who are serial offenders and are travelling 120 miles an hour.
So you are actually saying that you think our roads would be safe, just as safe, without speed limits? Because I just don't agree.
No, I don't agree without speed limits. I think there should be speed limits, but I think instead of having speeding as a national pastime, you have a speed limit that people actually support and agree with, and you police it more toughly. So, for example, again, I point my attention to France. They are absolutely fastidious with their speed limits, and you know, because of their toll systems, if you go too fast, you will be picked up and you will be fined. It's as simple as that. But the thing is that because it's 85 miles an hour, a lot of people think, actually, that's fine, and they stick within the speed limit.
Yeah, but speed limits apart, you touched on the smart motorways, and I can say from experience that just recently, coming back from Southampton to London, a car broke down in what would have been the hard shoulder, and it caused a 1-hour traffic delay for us. And that's just an example of how it can cause problems. Never mind the fact that if somebody breaks down in what used to be the hard shoulder, the dangers for them. I just don't understand how this could possibly have been rolled out, bearing in mind what the public thinks about these smart motorways. How on earth have we got into a situation where they're even happening?
Nobody other than Grant Shapps seems to think that they're a good idea. Anyway, Viv, we will come to some more front pages and stories from you in a few moments' time. Plus, we might sneak in a cheeky call as well. That's all to come here on Talk TV. 6:20 is the time, going through the papers with Vivian Krieger, former BBC and Sky News reader. Viv, let's just whip our way through the rest of the front pages. So the Mirror focuses on 3 million more to fall into the poverty trap, focusing on the cost of living crisis. The Daily Mail, how could they give my son to my deceitful neighbour? Mother's despair as social workers and courts let manipulative ex-murder suspect take custody of a toddler. Extraordinary story there. The Sun leads on Ryan Giggs' 17-day domestic abuse trial sensationally collapsed yesterday. The Daily Star talks about the £3 billion Royal Navy warship which broke down and why. The Daily Express, resting Queen won't risk greeting new Prime Minister in London. And the iNewspapers, Tories urge Truss to act fast on UK energy hikes. Let's go to some of the papers. A lot of them picking up on Gorbachev and his legacy. He's passed away at the age of 91. Very interesting. The West clearly lauds him for the end of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union or anybody in Russia didn't really laud him at all.
No, isn't it curious how everybody's split into two divisions over this? One thing that I was fascinated by was to listen to people in Russia now talking about their feelings about Gorbachev. And we all assume in the West, of course, that they must have hated living under Soviet rule when it was a strictly communist country. I mean, it's very much still a communist country, I think we all believe, but obviously it's a bit more relaxed these days. But to us, it was all about going into shops, nothing to buy, being told what you could and couldn't say, no dissent, etc., etc. And yet these Russians that they interviewed on the television last night were all saying that they didn't like what Gorbachev did to break up the Soviet Union, which sort of makes you think that they didn't mind living under strict communist rule, where we all think, why would they want to live like that? And so we in the West see Gorbachev as this great man who will go down in history, we think, certainly in the West, as one of the greatest politicians of all time, and but not so much in Russia. It will be interesting to see if Putin goes to his funeral, I guess.
Well, exactly. No state funeral for him either, which, again, strikes me as most peculiar. But, again, as you say, different perspectives on that single story. We're going to take a quick call. Do you need two parents to bring up a family is my question. Russ is in Coventry. Russ, good morning.
Good morning, James. How are you?
Good morning, Russ. I'm very well indeed, thank you. What do you make of this story, which has appeared on the front page of the Times, but also Telegraph, where we're starting to question, if you like, our family makeup, and then inevitably people will extrapolate into social or other problems?
It's very interesting because I've got actually every aspect because I'm just slightly over 70. I was brought up originally because my father and mother split very early by my grandparents.
Right.
Until I went to work, and I only really saw my father during holidays. Mm-hmm. And I met my mother rather strangely through working in a hotel that I was working in when I was 19. I was actually introduced to my mum. So, and then I go on to get married at 20. And we have one child. Unfortunately, we split at when I was 29, but I remarried again very quickly, and I've actually been married 41 years.
Congratulations!
3 successful children.
Yes.
Thank you, and still in touch with the other one. So really, I've seen sort of every aspect, and our children are really close.
Do you think, Russ, though, when we start to look at this sort of nuclear family, when I was chatting to Viv about it before, if we're too pejorative, if we're too judgmental about how people bring up children or families, then you can start to stigmatise, and actually there are some good parents and there are some bad parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, and all through this, I mean, in fairness, my wife actually said, and she's not here to back me up because I'm actually away working at the moment, and basically she's always said, well, it was almost a one-parent family because in the earlier years I was a buyer.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the thing. Russ, we must leave it there, but thank you so much for your call. Good to chat. Viv, back to you. So let's move from Gorbachev to I suppose aspects of the Queen. So you've picked out the story about fears for the Queen, which is in today's Daily Star. But I suppose this all feeds into the narrative as to, well, hang on a second, the new Prime Minister is going to have to go up to Balmoral. I mean, I'm assuming then the news stations, I mean, you know, your former employers, they'll be salivating at the prospect of being able to film all this stuff.
Well, quite, but what also occurred to me was with the Scots pushing for a second vote on independence, I thought how nice, perhaps, to placate the Scots a bit, if you like, that the Queen is going to greet the new Prime Minister up in Scotland. And yes, fears for her health, but really, why should she break her holiday? 96 years old. She is a little bit frail now, we all know that. To come down to London to swear in the new Prime Minister when they could come up to her, which is what they're going to do. And apparently it's only happened about 2 other times in history, I think.
And never before with her. Because this is her 15th Prime Minister, isn't it?
It is indeed. She's seen off a lot of prime ministers, James.
She does get through them. Let's talk a little bit about Nigella, because she's she's never shy in coming forward with, shall we say, some radical changes, and it sounds like we're going to have to completely change how we cook.
Well, do you know, the whole reason why I picked this out was because I was watching MasterChef the other night. Do you watch MasterChef?
I do on occasion, yes. And I do like a bit of chefery.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, what I always thought was you do not ever consider that on MasterChef anybody's going to use a microwave. And I've never heard them say they use a microwave before. But the other night, there's an actor on at the moment, I think he's in Hollyoaks, and he made a Parmesan tuile. Oh. And John Turode said, "Did you do that in the microwave?" And the actor said, "Yes, I did." And I thought, This is extraordinary. How many series of MasterChef have we had? And nobody has ever mentioned using a microwave before. I thought, well, there you go. That's what we all do when we're in the kitchen. So it brought everything down to earth for me.
Is there anything which is better in a microwave? I mean, I always think that, you know, soup and things like that are often better. But is there anything that's better in a microwave?
Oh, absolutely, James. You just need to know about salmon. Fresh salmon cooked in the microwave. Absolutely brilliant. Stays moist.
Yes.
Terrific. Try it.
Yeah, no, in fact, no, now you mentioned it, I have done salmon. And as long as you don't do it too long or too hard, then, because it can explode.
Bit of soy sauce, that's the trick.
Lovely. Now, just a very quick word. We got some tips here to cut our cost of food bills, since we're on that subject and trying to save ourselves. We probably have a couple of them. What are the best ones?
Well, the only thing I wanted to point out was that somebody the other day, this is not what was in the Express, but somebody the other day said, we must limit the number of times we eat out. Oh. And I just thought, come on, this is slightly insensitive. There are pensioners out there worrying how they're going to heat their homes in the winter. And somebody is saying you can limit the number of times you eat out. That is absolutely crazy. But obviously it's all the same sort of thing. It's reduce your food waste, plan your grocery shopping, buy in bulk, all that sort of thing. And clearly in the weeks and months to come, we're going to hear a lot more about this.
We certainly are. Viv, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Vivian Krieger, former BBC and Sky News presenter. Thank you so much for your time in going through the papers. Meanwhile, it's time to say very good morning to Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's here. Good morning.
And a very, very good morning to you as well. Yeah, lots to talk about again. Often, cost of living.
Yes.
10% fall in people's real disposable income. That's about £3,000 per household. That's a heck of a lot of cash.
And it's not just this year, is it?
Not just this year. It's going to keep on going, yeah.